My name is Derek Coleman, and for 12 years, I believed that hard work could actually change the world. I was reviewing server performance metrics on a Friday afternoon when the email hit my inbox at 4:17 p.m. Pacific Time. Subject line, employment status update, immediate action required. My stomach dropped before I even clicked it open. You know that sinking feeling when you're about to get life-changing bad news? Yeah, that was me staring at my computer screen in our Palo Alto office. The email was 4 sentences long. 12 years of my life reduced to corporate speak that could have been copy-pasted from a template. Dear Mr. Coleman, after careful consideration, we have decided that your services are no longer required at Atlas Technologies. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Please return all company property to HR by end of business today. Thank you for your contributions. That was it. No phone call, no face-to-face meeting, no explanation. Just a digital pink slip delivered with all the warmth of a parking ticket. My hands were actually shaking as I reread those 4 sentences. 12 years. I had missed my daughter's first steps because of a server crisis. Worked through my anniversary dinner for a client deadline. And this was how it ended. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes, watching my co-workers type away at their keyboards, completely unaware that I'd just become a ghost in the building. The crazy part. That morning, I'd been debugging the authentication system that kept our biggest clients' data secure. Atlas Technologies processed over $3 billion in transactions daily, and the distributed caching algorithms I'd built from scratch handled peak loads that would crash our competitors' platforms. Netflix's entire Christmas streaming traffic, that ran on code I'd written at 2 a.m. while my family slept upstairs. Growing up in Akron, Ohio, my dad worked at the Goodyear plant for 38 years. Mom cleaned houses for wealthy families in Hudson. We shopped at Walmart and considered Applebee's a special occasion. Dad always said, "Son, there's 2 kinds of people in this world. Those who build things and those who just talk about building things. Be a builder." I never had the luxury of a computer science degree from some fancy school. What I had was discipline and too many late nights teaching myself Python, Java, and C++ while my high school buddies were out partying. I'd been the backbone of Atlas Tech's infrastructure for over a decade. The security protocols I'd designed had prevented 3 major breaches in the past year alone. Attacks that would have cost Atlas over $80 million in client compensation and regulatory fines. The distributed system I'd architected had a 97% uptime rate, industry best. When Goldman Sachs needed their trading platform to handle Black Friday volumes, they licensed my load balancing algorithms. When Airbnb's booking system crashed during peak summer season 2 years ago, they called me directly to consult on the fix. While Preston Vale and his executive team sat in their glass offices talking about synergy and disruption, I was in the trenches building the actual foundation that kept their $1. $8 billion valuation from crumbling. Preston Vale was everything I wasn't. At 52, he was pure Silicon Valley royalty. Yale MBA, connected family. The kind of guy who name-dropped his weekend golf games with venture capitalists like they were old drinking buddies. He drove a Porsche Taycan, lived in a $2 million house in Los Altos Hills, and had that particular tech executive swagger that comes from never having to worry about a mortgage payment. But here's what really got me. Preston's idea of technical leadership was forwarding TechCrunch articles with subject lines like thoughts. He'd once asked our security team if we could make the encryption more streamlined, because it was slowing down the user experience. Last month, he'd spent $400,000 on McKinsey consultants to explain basic cloud architecture to the board, concepts I could teach to a high schooler over lunch. His technical presentations were word salads from consulting reports, delivered with the confidence of someone who'd never debugged a line of code in his life. Looking back, the warning signs had been there for weeks. Jenny from HR had stopped making eye contact during our Monday meetings. The usual Friday beer runs had mysteriously excluded me. Even my direct reports seemed nervous when I asked about their weekend plans. But I was too focused on optimizing our database queries to pay attention to office politics. The financial pressure was crushing. We had a $680,000 mortgage on our 4-bedroom house in Mountain View. My dad's medical bills from his heart surgery last year were still coming in, $23,000 even after insurance. Tommy was 14 and already talking about Stanford like his old man. Katie was 11 and wanted to go to summer camp with her friends. The doctor had been warning me about my blood pressure for months, calling it dangerously elevated during my last checkup. He'd actually written recommend immediate stress management on my chart, which was medical speak for this job is killing you. But that dedication came with a brutal price. I'd missed Tommy's championship baseball game last spring because a coordinated DDoS attack had brought down our servers during peak business hours. Skipped Katie's piano recital in December when a major client threatened to pull their $12 million contract over a security vulnerability I had to patch. Lisa, my wife, had stopped asking when I'd be home for dinner. She'd just make my plate and leave it in the microwave with a note. Another late night saving the company? For years, my relationship with Preston was professionally cordial. He'd nod approvingly during my quarterly presentations, occasionally throwing out phrases like, "Excellent work, Derek," or "This is exactly the kind of innovation that sets us apart." I thought we had mutual respect. I thought my dedication meant something to him. Man, was I wrong about that. Security escorted me out that Friday evening. Miguel, the guard who'd worked there almost as long as me, looked genuinely confused. We'd talked every morning for years about his son's soccer league and his wife's nursing program at San Jose State. "See you Monday, Mr. Coleman," he called out, not knowing that Monday would be very different for both of us. "See you around, Miguel," I replied, not having the heart to explain that tomorrow would bring a lot of changes. The drive home was a blur of Highway 101 traffic and classic rock from the local station. I kept the radio loud to drown out the questions spinning in my head. Why now? What had I done wrong? Was this really just about cost cutting, or was there something bigger happening that I'd missed? That evening, I did what any reasonable person does when their world implodes. I ordered pizza from our local place, cracked open a beer, and tried to make sense of it all. Lisa found me on the couch around 9, laptop open, already scrolling through job listings on LinkedIn. The kids were upstairs doing homework, completely unaware that Daddy's steady paycheck had just disappeared. "How bad is it?" Lisa asked, settling down next to me with her own beer. She'd been working as a nurse at Stanford Medical for 8 years, so she knew how to read people's stress levels better than most. "Bad," I said. "No severance package mentioned. They just cut me loose after 12 years of keeping their entire platform running." We'd been married for 16 years. She knew me well enough to see past the calm exterior to the anger building underneath. "There's got to be more to this story," she said. "Companies don't just fire their top engineers without reason. Especially not the guy who built their entire infrastructure from the ground up." She was right, of course. There was more to the story. A lot more, I just didn't know it yet. It was while cleaning out my home office the following weekend that I stumbled across something that changed everything. I was going through old files, tossing expired warranties and outdated tax documents, when I found a folder labeled Patent Stuff 2019. Inside was an email from Dr. Alan Brooks that I'd completely forgotten about. Dr. Brooks had been my computer science professor at Ohio State before moving to a small consulting firm in San Francisco. Back in 2019, he'd reached out after hearing about some innovative work I'd done on distributed computing architecture. The email subject line read, "Patent documentation. This is critical." "Derek," the message began, "what you've created here isn't just clever coding. It's a fundamental breakthrough in how distributed systems communicate. This algorithm doesn't just synchronize data, it predicts optimal server loads 23 seconds before peak demand hits, preventing crashes that cost companies millions. File the paperwork. Trust me on this. Big companies have a way of forgetting where their best ideas actually came from." My hands were shaking as I read those words again. I remembered dismissing his urgency back then. Atlas Technologies was my employer. Anything I created belonged to them, right? But Dr. Brooks had been insistent. He'd even connected me with a patent attorney, Sarah Torres, who specialized in software patents and had a small practice in downtown San Jose. The patent had been approved in late 2019, System and Method for Predictive Load Distribution in Cloud Computing Environments. Patent number US 11,247,856, filed under my name alone, Derek Coleman, sole inventor. $22,000 from our emergency fund and a credit union loan. Lisa had trusted my judgment, even when I couldn't fully explain why it mattered. I pulled up the USPTO database with trembling fingers. Please still be active. Please still be mine. There it was, still valid, nearly 15 more years remaining on its 20-year term. Then I cross-referenced it with Atlas's internal documentation. What I found made my blood run cold, then hot with something I hadn't felt in years. Pure, focused anger. My algorithm wasn't just powering Atlas's platform. It was Atlas's platform. Every transaction, every client success story, every dollar of their $1, $8 billion valuation depended on code I owned. According to their own SEC filings, my patented technology generated 84% of Atlas's revenue. I sat back in my kitchen chair and started laughing. Actually laughing, loud enough that Lisa came downstairs. "Derek, you okay?" "Honey, come look at this." I spread the patent documents across our kitchen table next to Atlas's revenue reports I'd pulled from their investor relations site. She studied the papers, her nurse's training making her good at analyzing complex information quickly. "So let me get this straight. They fired you for being unnecessary." "That's right. And this technology you own generates how much of their revenue?" 84%. Lisa looked up from the documents and smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in months. Preston Vale is about to have a very bad year. Monday morning, I drove to Sarah Torres's office in downtown San Jose. She was in her late 40s, a former big law attorney who'd gone solo after getting tired of partnership politics at firms like Morrison and Associates. "Derek Coleman," she said, recognizing me immediately. "I was wondering when you'd call." "Sarah, I need to understand exactly what I'm sitting on here." We spent 2 hours going through every detail. Atlas had been using my patented technology for nearly 5 years without any licensing agreement. They'd simply assumed employee work belonged to them. My 2014 employment contract contained zero language about patent assignment. Every day they use your technology without authorization. They're committing willful patent infringement, Sarah explained. But here's where it gets interesting. Atlas is in advanced merger talks with Meridian Systems. $720 million deal supposed to close mid-year. What happens when Meridian discovers Atlas doesn't own their core technology? The deal dies instantly. No board would approve acquiring a company facing potential patent litigation worth hundreds of millions. That afternoon, I called Dr. Brooks. "Derek, I've been waiting for this call for 6 years, he said immediately. "You remember what I told you about documentation? You said companies forget where their ideas come from. They don't just forget, they convince themselves they never needed you in the first place." Preston Vale is about to learn that lesson the hard way. "What's your plan?" I'd been thinking about that all day. I have 2 choices. Call Preston and negotiate, or let him discover the truth during due diligence. The first gets you money. The second gets you justice. After 12 years of loyalty repaid with a form letter, justice feels a lot more satisfying. Dr. Brooks chuckled. Companies like Atlas think they can treat their technical talent like disposable resources. They forget that innovation comes from people, not org charts. Sometimes the best lessons are the ones that cost the most. I spent the next few days researching Preston Vale himself. His LinkedIn profile was a masterclass in nepotism, daddy's connections to 3 different VC firms, board positions inherited through family networks, lateral moves between executive roles. The guy had never written a line of code in his life, never pulled an all-nighter debugging a critical system. While I was teaching myself advanced algorithms from MIT courseware at 2 a.m., Preston was probably at networking events talking about synergistic opportunities. Internal documents I accessed through former colleagues showed he'd hired external consultants 17 times in 2 years to explain basic technical concepts to the board. The consulting bills alone totaled over $800,000, more than 3 times my annual salary. The merger news was everywhere. TechCrunch called it transformative. The Wall Street Journal quoted Preston about pivotal moments. Forbes featured him on their Disruptors to Watch list. My former colleagues were posting excited LinkedIn updates, completely unaware their CEO's biggest deal was built on technology he didn't own. Meanwhile, my blood pressure had dropped to normal levels for the first time in months. Sarah called Thursday afternoon. Meridian's legal team started their IP audit. Based on typical timelines, they'll discover your patent within 2 weeks. What happens then? Preston Vale has the worst day of his professional life. I thought about calling him, giving a heads up, working out licensing terms. But then I remembered that Friday email, 4 sentences, 12 years reduced to corporate boilerplate. For 12 years, I'd felt like a replaceable cog in Preston's machine. Now I realized the truth. He was nothing without me. The company, the merger, his entire career, all built on my work. Preston had thrown me away like garbage. Time to show him what happens when you disrespect the guy who built your kingdom. Let them find it, I told Sarah. Let's see how far they get before Preston realizes he doesn't actually own his most valuable asset. That weekend, I helped Tommy practice pitching in our backyard, actually present for once instead of mentally debugging server issues. When he asked what I was smiling about, I told him sometimes patience pays off in ways you never expect. The waiting game had begun, and for the first time in years, I held all the cards. The call came on a Tuesday evening while I was helping Katie with her algebra homework. My phone showed an unknown number with a 650 area code. Classic Peninsula business line. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick up. "Derek, this is Preston Vale. We need to talk. Now." His voice had lost all its usual executive polish. Gone was the smooth confidence that had charmed investors and intimidated competitors for years. He sounded like a man who'd just discovered his house was built on quicksand. "Hello, Preston. I'm surprised to hear from you. Last time we spoke, it was through a 4-sentence email. Cut the games, Derek. You know exactly why I'm calling. We just got the preliminary IP audit back from Meridian's legal team. There's an issue with patent US 11,247,856. I let the silence stretch while Katie worked through her equations. The irony wasn't lost on me, helping my daughter solve problems while Preston's world was falling apart. "I'm not sure what you mean, Preston. Could you be more specific? Don't play dumb with me." That algorithm is the foundation of our entire platform. Our clients process billions of transactions through that system daily. Netflix, Goldman Sachs, half the Fortune 500, they all depend on it. If there's some kind of ownership dispute, there's no dispute, Preston. The patent is very clear about who invented the technology and who owns it. Maybe you should have paid attention to who was actually building your company instead of hiring $800,000 worth of consultants to explain it to you. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear his breathing through the phone. "Look, Derek, we can work something out. Maybe there was an oversight in the original employment paperwork. We can backdate a licensing agreement, make this problem disappear. What do you want? Stock options, a consulting contract? We're reasonable people here. Reasonable people don't fire loyal employees by email, Preston. And I'm not interested in backdating anything. That would be fraud, wouldn't it? Though I suppose fraud is probably just another Tuesday for you. Derek, you need to understand what you're doing here. This merger affects hundreds of jobs, thousands of clients, millions of users. You can't just blow up a $720 million deal because you're upset about being laid off." I looked at Katie, bent over her homework, completely absorbed in solving for X. 12 years I'd missed moments like this for Preston's company. 12 years of choosing his problems over my family. "I'm not blowing up anything, Preston. I'm just a guy with a patent who got fired by email after building your entire infrastructure from scratch. What happens next is entirely up to you. Name your price. Seriously, whatever you want. What I wanted was respect after 12 years of making you rich. What I wanted was a phone call instead of a form letter. What I wanted was for you to remember that real people built the foundation you've been taking credit for." I hung up on Preston Vale that Tuesday night, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete control over my own destiny. The next morning brought chaos. My phone rang 13 times before 9 a.m. Calls from Atlas's head of legal, their CTO, and what seemed like half the corporate law firms in Silicon Valley. I let them all go to voicemail and spent the morning at my local gym, working through a deadlift session that felt particularly satisfying. The messages were increasingly desperate. Subject lines ranged from professional, urgent patent licensing discussion to panicked, time-critical business matter. Please respond immediately. The most interesting call came from Meridian's general counsel, Patricia Wong, a name I recognized from Forbes articles about high-stakes corporate litigation. "Mr. Coleman, this is Patricia Wong from Meridian Systems. I believe we need to have a conversation about patent US 11,247,856 and its implications for our pending acquisition. I'm hoping we can find a mutually beneficial resolution." Mutually beneficial. Corporate speak for you have us over a barrel. Please don't squeeze too hard. I called Sarah Torres first. "Derek, my phone hasn't stopped ringing since yesterday. Half the law firms in Silicon Valley want to represent Atlas in settlement negotiations. The other half want to represent you in litigation. I've never seen anything quite like this. What's your read on the situation?" Meridian is sophisticated. They knew exactly what to look for in the IP audit. When they found your patent powering 84% of Atlas's revenue, their deal team probably called an emergency board meeting. No company acquires technology they don't own. Preston showed up at my apartment complex Saturday morning. I watched him from my second-floor window, standing in the visitor parking lot next to his Porsche Taycan. The car looked out of place among the Hondas and Toyotas, just like Preston looked out of place in his wrinkled $1,000 suit. He'd aged 5 years and 5 days. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive clothes looked slept in, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. The confident executive who delivered quarterly presentations with practiced ease was gone. replaced by someone who looked genuinely desperate. I debated whether to go down, but curiosity won out. "Derek, thank God," he said when I appeared. "We need to resolve the situation before it destroys everything." "Everything or just your merger?" "Look, I made mistakes. The layoffs were handled poorly. I should have called you personally, should have offered you a proper severance package, should have shown more respect for your contributions. But we can fix this." It was fascinating watching a man who'd wielded absolute power over my life just weeks ago now begging for mercy in a suburban parking lot. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. "Preston, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to license my patent to whoever wants to use it. Fair market rates, standard terms, no exclusivity agreements. If Atlas wants to continue using my technology, you can pay for it just like everyone else. But the merger, Meridian won't proceed without clean IP. Their board is meeting Monday to review the audit results. Sounds like you should have thought about that before you decided I was unnecessary." "Derek, please, I know I screwed up, but think about all the people this affects. Sarah from accounting, Miguel the security guard, all the engineers on your old team. They don't deserve to lose their jobs because of my mistake. Funny how you care about other people's jobs now. Where was that concern when you were firing the guy who built your platform?" His shoulders sagged. "What do you want from me? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to remember that the people who actually build things matter more than the people who just talk about building things. And I want you to live with the knowledge that you destroyed your own company because you were too arrogant to respect the talent that made you successful." Preston's face went pale. "You're really going to let the merger die?" "I'm not letting anything die, Preston. You killed it the moment you sent that email. I'm just not resurrecting it for you." The news broke Monday afternoon. TechCrunch ran the headline, "Atlas Meridian merger collapses amid patent dispute." The Wall Street Journal was more direct. $720 million deal dies as cloud giant discovers it doesn't own key technology. Preston's statement was a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak. While we're disappointed that certain technical issues couldn't be resolved within the merger timeline, Atlas remains committed to our innovative cloud solutions and our valued clients. What he didn't mention was that Atlas's stock price had dropped 43% in after-hours trading, wiping out nearly $850 million in shareholder value. The company that had deemed me unnecessary was now facing potential bankruptcy if they couldn't secure a license to use their own core technology. Sarah called that evening with an update. Atlas's board called an emergency meeting. Word is they're voting on Preston's future tomorrow morning. And? Let's just say updating your LinkedIn might not be Preston's biggest priority right now. Lisa found me on our back patio that night, watching Tommy practice pitching against our fence. "How are you feeling about all this?" she asked. "You know what's strange? I'm not angry anymore. I'm not even particularly happy about Preston's situation. I just feel free." "Free?" "For the first time in 12 years, I don't have to worry about someone else's emergency becoming my crisis. I don't have to choose between their deadlines and our family. I get to decide what matters." Tommy called over from the fence. "Dad, you think I'm ready for varsity tryouts next year? Come here, buddy. Let's work on your form." For the first time in years, nothing was more important than my son's fastball. Preston Vale was fired by Atlas's board on Thursday morning. The official statement cited strategic differences and failure to manage critical business relationships. His replacement was the CFO, Greg Murphy, a quiet guy who'd actually started as an engineer before moving into finance. Greg had been there since the early days and understood what it meant to build something from scratch. Greg called me that same afternoon. Unlike Preston's panicked desperation, Greg's approach was straightforward and professional. "Derek, this is Greg Murphy. I'm sure you know I've just been named interim CEO. I'd like to discuss licensing terms for your patent." "I'm listening. We both know Atlas can't survive without your technology. We're prepared to offer fair market value for a non-exclusive license, plus back pay for the 5 years we've been using it without authorization." "What kind of numbers are we talking about?" $100 million for the license, plus $25 million in back pay. Total of $125 million. I nearly dropped the phone. $125 million. For a patent I'd almost forgotten existed. That's substantial. "Derek, I've reviewed your personnel file from top to bottom. I was there when you single-handedly saved us from that Christmas Eve server crash in 2018. I watched you prevent 3 major security breaches that would have killed us. Preston's handling of your termination was inexcusable. You built this company's foundation, and we should have recognized that years ago. That was the closest thing to an apology I was going to get from Atlas Technologies. And honestly, it was enough. Within 3 weeks, I had 6 competing offers from major cloud providers who wanted to license my patent. Amazon Web Services led the pack with $55 million upfront plus 22% royalties on all implementations. Google Cloud offered $48 million plus consulting contracts. Microsoft threw in partnership opportunities that would have made my old salary look like pocket change. The tech industry was smaller than people realized. Word had gotten out about the guy from Ohio who'd brought down a $750 million merger with a single patent. TechCrunch ran a follow-up article titled The Derek Coleman Effect: How One Patent Changed Silicon Valley's Approach to Engineering Talent. Forbes called it the revenge of the builders. Sarah Torres was having the time of her life. I've been practicing patent law for 15 years, she told me during our final strategy session. I've never seen anything create this much industry buzz. You've got CEOs calling emergency meetings to audit their own IP portfolios. Meanwhile, Atlas Technologies was hemorrhaging clients faster than their servers could process cancellation requests. Netflix had already migrated their infrastructure to AWS, citing concerns about platform stability. 3 Fortune 500 companies followed suit within days. The tech press was calling it the Atlas Exodus. The licensing agreement with Atlas was signed on a Tuesday morning in Sarah's modest downtown office. Greg Murphy signed for the company, looking relieved that they'd finally secured the rights to their own core technology. $125 million for a non-exclusive license to patent U.S. $11,247,856. I used part of the settlement to pay off our mortgage that same day. Lisa actually cried when I told her we owned our house free and clear. No more worrying about layoffs, she said, hugging me in our kitchen. No more choosing between family time and someone else's emergency. The kids didn't fully understand what had happened, but they knew Daddy wasn't stressed about money anymore. My blood pressure at my next doctor's appointment was completely normal for the first time in years. Whatever you're doing differently, doctor. Peterson said, keep doing it. 6 months later, doctor. Brooks called with a proposition. Derek, I've been thinking about coming out of retirement. What would you say to starting a consulting firm together? Focus on helping individual inventors protect their intellectual property. What would we call it? How about Brooks Coleman Patent Advisory? We opened our doors 3 months later in a renovated warehouse space in downtown San Jose, not far from where Sarah had her practice. Our mission was simple: help working engineers and programmers understand their rights and protect their innovations before companies could exploit them. Our first client was a brilliant young programmer from Detroit named Marcus Williams, who developed a revolutionary approach to machine learning optimization. He reminded me of myself at 25, talented, hardworking, and completely naive about the business side of technology. Here's the most important advice I can give you, I told him during our initial consultation. Always file the paperwork. Always protect your work. Document everything. Companies have a way of forgetting where their best ideas actually came from, but patents have long memories. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd learned more about business strategy from being betrayed than I had from 12 years of loyal employment. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's building something better and making sure it can never be taken away from you again. Preston Vale landed at a smaller firm 8 months later, with a significantly reduced title and a fraction of his previous salary. I heard through the Silicon Valley grapevine that he'd been essentially blacklisted from CEO positions at major tech companies. Word gets around when you mismanage a deal that badly. Business schools were already using the Atlas Meridian collapse as a case study in the importance of respecting technical talent. Within 18 months, I'd licensed my patent to 7 major cloud providers. Atlas's market share dropped from 31% to 14% as clients migrated to platforms with more stable IP foundations and better engineering cultures. The company that had deemed me unnecessary was now a cautionary tale about what happens when you forget who actually builds your success. These days, I sleep well at night, knowing that every line of code I write belongs to me until I decide otherwise. I coach Tommy's baseball team on weekends. He made varsity as a sophomore, and I haven't missed a single game. Lisa and I actually have dinner together most nights. Katie's piano recitals are no longer optional. They're the highlight of my week. Last month, Tommy asked me what I learned from the whole experience with Atlas. Well, buddy, I learned that loyalty is a two-way street. I learned that your work is worth more than you think it is. And I learned that sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is getting fired. Really? Because it forced me to value myself the way I should have all along. When young programmers ask me for career advice, I tell them the same thing, doctor. Brooks told me back in 2019, always have a plan B, because corporations have a way of forgetting that their success stands on the shoulders of the people who actually build things. The patent expires in 2039. By then, Tommy will be in his 30s, maybe with kids of his own. Katie will be starting her career, hopefully in something she loves, and I'll be able to tell them that their college educations were paid for by their dad's refusal to be treated like he didn't matter. David didn't beat Goliath with luck. He beat him with preparation and one perfect shot. If you're out there grinding away at some company, building their dreams while neglecting your own, remember this story. Document your innovations. File the paperwork. Protect your work. Because companies will use you until you're empty, then toss you aside. But if you're smart, if you document your worth and protect your work, you can turn the tables when they least expect it. And if they ever fire you by email after years of loyal service, well, you'll be ready. That's worth more than all the stock options in Silicon Valley.